Let's start with a story that you just put out just this morning. Trump barely pulls into lead in latest national poll. Now, we've talked a lot about the polls, Rodney. A lot of our viewers they either don't believe the polls or are suspect about some of the numbers coming out of the major polling outfits. This one in particular comes from Rasmussen. It said President Trump pulls ahead of challenger Joe Biden by 1%. And as you say, it's not much of a lead, but it's within the margin of error, the survey. And it doesn't really necessarily count as a lead because, it's a couple of percent's margin of error. But it does matter. And one of the things, a point that you make often when it comes to economic data, and I'm going to just apply it here to polling data, is it's not necessarily the numbers themselves, but the trend in those numbers.
Right.
And so what are we seeing in the trend over the last couple of weeks?
Well, and like you said, it's the first time that he's had a lead. And so that's interesting in and of itself. And it's certainly the first time that he's been over 45% in terms of likely voters. Now, I want to caution on this. This is a national poll. And so if you are picking up a couple of more voters in the states you're already going to win, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And so this is all about, the election is going to be all about these swing states, which I know we beat on, but we got to keep that, top of mind.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes a question of why. And so nobody can say, because the voters that are saying, yes, I would, didn't say a week before, no, I wouldn't, and then this is why or whatever. But you can look around at what's going on and say, well, Trump's message is law and order, and you're seeing the national trend in opinion moving against these protests that have become violent. People saying, hey, that's not what I want. I mean, everybody, or most everybody I've talked to has seen or pointed out, they're all for protests because it's our right in the Constitution, but the violence, not a chance. And so with Trump coming out and getting in front of this and saying, wait a second, you can protest, but all this, arson and the rioting and, all that other stuff, that's got to go.
Yeah.
And so I think that's resonating. And we can't discount people who are leaving Joe Biden. And so it's not as if these people went from undecided to Trump, right? They're actually flipping a little bit. And so are people getting a better look at Joe Biden, a better understanding of what he says he wants to do, and deciding that's not their thing? So I don't know, probably a combination.
Yeah, Biden coming out of the basement, because at some point he has to, and now he's been sort of out and about. Although, and for everybody, for our viewers, they may have seen me attend the Mike Pence rally, which is just a few miles down the road in Clearwater, Florida. And I told them I was looking to see when Biden or Harris or somebody like that would come to the Tampa area, and I'd try to be there myself. Now, just this week, Biden did come to Tampa, Hillsborough County, to talk to 6 veterans. There was no place for me to go there. There was no like in the Pence rally, there was about 200 or 300 people in a hotel conference room. No such event for Biden, so I did not have the opportunity to go there. I don't know necessarily what the point of traveling to a state just to meet with a couple of people is, but I guess that shows him going out there.
Well, I mean, it serves a couple of purposes. One, it illustrates what he's trying to get across, is that he is the candidate that's recognizing the seriousness of this situation and the gravitas of the pandemic. And so he's not holding these big events because he feels that it would put people at risk, but he's still out there. And so on the flip side of it, it creates some buzz in the local news. You know he was there meeting with 6 people because the local press is telling you that. And so that's what he needs, is he needs to be top of mind in these battleground states. And you can't do it by, talking about something from, a studio at your home or anything else. You got to show up. Yeah. People talk about it when you show up. And to the point, you just saw Trump hold the rally in Nevada, and people are upset with him, but they all reported it. And so it turns into that free press, right? Which is what he got so much of in the 2016 election cycle, where he didn't spend a nickel or not very much on advertising because he didn't have to, because the press was talking about him all the time.
Yeah. Last thing on this poll, now that, as I'm not sure if I mentioned, this is from Rasmussen, so it is a right-leaning poll.
Yep.
Yeah, this isn't exactly Quinnipiac University polling here,
but
which Biden.
Even their poll, he has not been ahead in their poll, their Washington Watch poll, since they started it 2.5 months ago. And so even though it's right leaning, I mean, they're not pulling punches on it. So
yeah, and some of the details as well is now I believe this may have been a separate poll, but it said that 52% of likely voters rate Trump's handling of the economy as good or excellent. Now that's up from 39% in mid 2017. That was, I guess, the low point. Now, and then another here, 49% think the president is doing a good job handling national security issues. So 2 points there is the economy. I mean, it seems to me just a function of things are coming back. So now Trump is getting credit for it. That's sort of how I read that. Get your thoughts on that. And then the last thing here on the handling national security issues, 49% approval. Could this be actually voters considering national security as maybe domestic insecurity?
I don't know. It's probably got something to do with that. I mean, taking these in the reverse order, national security first, we would be remiss if we didn't look at the protests and people saying they want to bring down America and, kill the police and light everything on fire as not a threat of some sort. There might not be that many of them. I mean, if you group them all together, I don't know, what is it, a few thousand people? I mean, in a nation of 335 million, it's not that big of a percentage, but it still gets your attention when they're lighting stuff on fire. And it could be that people have watched Trump over his tenure take a hard line on Iran and take a hard line on China and say, look, this is what we're doing with these different situations around the world, where he's not trying to make peace with everybody. He's straight out saying, look, America first. That's my job. That's what we're doing. And the message resonates.
What about
certainly resonates with some.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on you there. But what about this recent peace deal between Israel, UAE, Bahrain, and potentially getting some of the Arab states involved here? Could that be maybe playing a role here? It does seem like it's a little bit under the radar. Do you make any bit of this news in terms of helping President Trump's support?
I don't know that it helps him as much as it could, because I think we talked about this last time as well. I mean, he's the only president, in modern history who can make a peace deal in the Middle East and it's not front page news, because he creates such an issue with everything else he says, right, that it kind of overshadows it. But the fact that it's done, I give him a lot of credit for. It's a huge deal. It's a pivot point in the Middle East. I don't think it can be overstated. And so there's a lot of history that is involved in that region, of course. The implacable foes over there who were not going to move. I mean, the Palestinian situation wasn't going to move because it didn't serve anybody's purpose for it to change. In terms of the power brokers, they weren't going to get a better deal by changing their stance. And so if you can get some of these outside-in states, being Bahrain and the other Gulf Emirates, to come along, nobody does anything over there without on that side of the fence without Arabia giving it their blessing. Now, it's tacit. They don't have to, come out in public and say it's the coolest thing ever. But you don't sign those deals unless the kingdom is on board. Yeah. And so that is an absolutely phenomenal change. And Trump is a big part of it, not just because Jared Kushner put it together, but because he took such a hard line on Tehran. And Tehran is the enemy of the region. I mean, not just directly, but through Hezbollah over in Lebanon and the other things they do. And so it's lining up as an us and them, and we're on the us side, and that's where we want to be. You talked about economics in the first part of that. Great news this week. I mean, fabulous news that median household income reached $68,700 in 2019. And so the highest in history. It expanded by 6.8%, the fastest rise in history. And the poverty rate dropped to 10.5%, which is the lowest since they started keeping records in 1959. And the spread narrowed. And so the inequality, men to women, among the races, from high income to low income, all of that narrowed. 2019 was fabulous in terms of all of those things for income. Now, it's COVID, right? We're in the land and time of COVID. And so 2019 might as well be 1,000 years ago. Yeah. But when you say Trump did a better job on the economy, well, you look at what went on, and it was pretty good years. I'm not a fan of all the debt. I don't think that we can handle this long term. But my goodness, you look at what people earned in income, and it was pretty good.